Hello, and welcome to the Bhagavatam. I was wondering, would you be willing to trade your youth for old age? I know that's a strange question. Would you be willing to forget the love of your life? Would you be willing to give away everything you have, everything, down to the last morsel of food that you have, to a stranger? You know, in a world where most of us care too much about how we look, what people think of us, and how much we possess, words like character, sacrifice, and detachment have little to no place. What do I mean? And why is this important? Why does character matter? I've heard it defined that our character comes through in defining moments because we commit to irreversible courses of action that shape our personal and professional identities. That's how you know somebody for real. When in the face of difficult situations, their true character, their true personality, their true identity shows through who they really are at the core. Because that reveals something new about ourselves and others. Because defining moments like that uncover something that has been hidden or crystallize something that is only partially known. We get to discover ourselves in those moments. We get to discover others. And we test ourselves because we discover whether we will live up to our personal ideals or only pay lip service to them. Sometimes the challenges that we're thrown at by life are so difficult, so complex, so daunting that we ourselves don't know how we'll make it through those challenges. And yet, in those moments, if we're able to keep our sanity, our values, our decency, our goodness, that defines our character. What do you think? What do you think is the importance of character in a time when everyone is all out for themselves? Let's take a look at sacrifice. Why does sacrifice matter? Once again, in this time when most people think primarily of themselves, where it's all about me, where it's all about how I look and what I have and what I do and who I know, sacrifice in this time has great meaning. Sacrifice means to give something, not to get something. It's not about what's in it for me. What can I get from you? It does not mean losing something, but in fact, in giving, we get back 100-fold. That is the principle that we've forgotten. And then again, why does detachment matter? In today's time, it matters a great deal. We are attached to everything. We're attached to our partner, our children, our home, our cars, possessions, our body, our looks, what people think of us, and on and on and on. And if someone disrupts this idealization, we take great offense. We get angry, we get hurt, we get depressed, and in the worst case scenario, we might even take our lives or their life for that matter. Detachment comes from understanding that all these ideas we have about ourselves are false. Our thoughts, our emotions, our perceptions, our opinions, and even the things we have, right down to our body, mind, and possessions, all of them are false. Then what's real? We're going to talk about that. None of these things matter. All of them will be lost in time. See, that's the gauge. The things that will be lost in time are the things that do not matter. And the things that cannot be lost by time are the things that matter. So ask yourself, what is it that you have that will not be lost even as you get old and even when you die? And you'll find out that the only thing left is you. You will survive everything. You will survive death. You will survive old age. You will survive the calamities of life and all the different things that show up. You are the only thing that's real. Everything else is false. So better to let go our grip of the false self so that we may find our real self. Better to let go of the false sense of happiness, security, love, or belonging and find something that is lasting, eternal, and truly satisfying to the soul. Let's begin our journey into the Bhagavatam as we end the 9th canto. Some of you get this. Thank you so much, Weber, for saying that. Character is everything. It defines us. Absolutely right. So, we're going to begin today with the Bhagavatam, Canto 9. We're coming to the final chapters of that. And after that, we're going to begin everything about Krishna. So, in this chapter, we're now talking about a very interesting story. This is the story of Yayati. And it begins with two women who are good friends. And they're walking in a park. Their names are Sharmishta and Devyani. So as they're walking in the park, something interesting happens. You see, Sharmishta was the daughter of a king, King Vrishaparva. And she was innocent, but angry by nature. And she was walking with her friend Devyani. Devyani was the daughter of the great sage and guru Shukracharya, a Brahmin. They were walking along with their friends in the palace garden. And the garden was full of lotuses and trees, and flowers and fruits, and sweetly singing birds and bumblebees. And in this scenario, when the young girls came to the bank of a reservoir of water, they wanted to enjoy by bathing. So they left their clothes on the bank and they began playing and sporting in the water, throwing water on each other, just being really fun and playful. Now, while sporting in the water, the girls suddenly saw Shiva passing by, seated on the back of Nandi, his bull, and along with his wife Parvati. So they felt ashamed because they were naked, and the girls got out of the water, quickly covered themselves with their garments. Now in this rush, Sarmishta, the one who was the princess, unknowingly put on Devyani's dress. So Sharmishta is the daughter of a king, and Devyani is the daughter of a great guru, a great sage, Shukracharya. So Sharmishta has unknowingly put on Devyani's dress. And in anger, Devyani referred to her friend as a maidservant who had disregarded the etiquette of Brahmins. Brahmins were like the priests, right? They had very strict codes of conduct and behavior and all kinds of stuff. So she compared Sharmishta, the princess, to a dog stealing ghee, which has been meant for sacrifice. She then went on to talk about the glories of the Brahmins, who are representatives of God. In contrast, her friend, her friend's father, was an asura, a demon, and the disciple of her father. So she was really putting on this arrogant attitude. She was so proud of her position as the daughter of Shukracharya, of this Brahmin, that she was just insulting this woman with cruel words. So Sharmishta was no less, right? Sharmishta, the princess, was no less. When rebuked with cruel words, Sharmishta became angry, and breathing heavily like a serpent and biting her lower lip with her teeth, she said, "You beggar, since you don't understand your position, why should you unnecessarily talk so much? Don't all of you wait at our house, depending on us for your livelihood, like crows?" See, Brahmins don't engage in any kind of business. They don't engage in ruling people. They don't engage in any kind of jobs. The only thing Brahmins do as priests is they teach the Vedas. They study and they teach. They engage in receiving charity and giving charity. Yajan, patan, dan, pratigraha. So there are specific activities for the Brahmins, and they can't go outside of that. It's not like in today's day where you'll see Brahmins. People say, "Well, I'm a Brahmin." No, no, you're just born in a family of Brahmins, and you're working in a job somewhere in the government, or you have a business or whatever else, but you're not engaged in the activities of a Brahmin. You see, this whole artificial system, which was designed by birth, was never the intention of the caste system, and it was never what was designed. The varna and ashram were around a person's ability, a person's aptitude. If they didn't have the aptitude, and if they didn't do the actions, varna, chatur varna maya srishtam, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, he says, I have established this. This is srishti, means to establish, to create. And chatur varna means the four varnas. Four varnas being the four ashrams are the brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas, and the four varnas are the brahmins, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and shudras, the priests, the rulers or warriors, the business people, and the workers. Right? We have it in society even today. It's nothing new. It's always been there. That there are different kinds of people. You have the middle class these days, and you have the upper middle class, and you have the lower income people, and you have those who are very wealthy. It's all there, right in front of us till today. And no one thinks ill of it. No one thinks there's something wrong. And it's not based on birth, although a lot of times the wealthy can pass on their wealth to their children, and those kids will, but usually they'll squander it all off, and then we're back again to the beginning, right? Anyways, back to our story. So the two girls are really mad at each other, really being insulting with each other, and then Sarmishta, the princess, takes away Devyani's clothes and throws her into a well. And not only that, she goes home, leaving Devyani in the well. Now, at this time, a particular king, Yayati, was engaged in hunting. And he happened to stop by the well to drink water, and by chance he saw Devyani naked inside the well. So out of kindness, he took off his upper cloth and he handed it to her and lifted her and brought her out. With great love and affection, Devyani said to the king, O great hero, O king, conqueror of the cities of your enemies, by accepting my hand, because he'd taken her out by her hand, you have accepted me as your married wife. I don't think the king was ready for this one, okay? He helps someone and she's saying like, oh my God, you took my hand, now you're married to me. Let me not be touched by others, she said, for our relationship as husband and wife has been made possible by providence and not by any human being. Because of falling in the well, I met you. Indeed, this has been arranged by providence. I was cursed that I would not have a Brahmin for a husband. So now it seems like she's getting a king as a husband. Well, here are a couple of pictures I was able to find. Perhaps they'll help you imagine the situation more clearly. And there's the king pulling her out of the well. Srila Prabhupada says, Devyani's father, the sage Shukracharya, had a disciple named Kacha. She had wanted to marry him, but Kacha, out of respect for his guru, refused her. She then cursed him that everything he had learned from her father would be useless. And he cursed her that she would never marry a Brahmin. So that's kind of the backstory. All of these have got backstories. You see, Vedic marriages usually took place amongst those of the same varna. They call it caste these days. That's not actually a true word. The varna is just a division of society, as I said earlier. However, under the circumstances, so usually Brahmins got married to Brahmins and Kshatriyas got married to Kshatriyas, like that. Under the circumstances, because King Yayati believed that it was arranged by providence, he bought into this idea, it's arranged by providence. And of course, the woman was extremely beautiful, and well, why not? He was a king, right? He was attracted by Devyani's beauty, so he accepted her request. Now, Devyani had to go home and tell her father, of course, what had happened. So she went home and she told her father, Shukracharya, all that had happened. And then Dad was mad. He took his daughter and went to the home of his disciple. So the king was his disciple. On the way there, they met the king, who was coming over to apologize on behalf of his daughter, his crazy daughter. So the king, Vrishaparva, the father of Sharmishta, fell at the feet of his guru, Shukracharya, and apologized profusely for his daughter's misbehavior. Shukracharya forgave him on condition that he would fulfill his daughter Devyani's request. And what was Devyani's request? It was an equally extreme request. Devyani said, "Whenever I marry, my friend Sharmishta must go with me as my maidservant, along with her friends." My goodness. From a princess to a maidservant. That was the deal. And since the father had given his word, and since it was the word given to his guru, there was no choice. There was no way out. King Vrishaparva, the father of the girl Sharmishta, had thought wisely. He thought that Shukracharya, being his guru, being a very powerful sage, if he displeased him, it would be very dangerous. And if he pleased him, there would be great material gain. So for his own benefit and well-being, he had given his word. And therefore he carried out his guru's order and gave his daughter Sharmishta to Devyani. Sharmishta then served Devyani like a slave. That was the penance she was doing now. When Shukracharya gave Devyani in marriage to King Yayati, so now the king and King Yayati and Devyani, you know how they met in the well and everything, right? All right, so now the father gave away the bride to the king. He warned the king. He says, "My dear king, never allow this girl, Sharmishta," that is the one who has now become the maidservant, the princess Sharmishta, "never allow her to lie with you in the same bed." He had an intuition. Now in time, Devyani had a wonderful son, and Sharmishta was envious. Sharmishta is with the maidservant now. She was envious and wanted a child too. So what did she do? She was not going to be, pushed over. So one day she approached the king in a secluded place and she requested, "Please give me a child as well." And the king, seeing her beauty, and the king being a very lustful man, agreed to fulfill her desire, thinking that the union was the desire of the providence. And so he had sex with Sharmishta. See, juicy story, right? When the proud Devyani found out that Sharmishta was pregnant by her husband, she was livid, frenzied with anger. And after having said everything she had to say, she departed for her father's house. The king, King Yayati, followed his wife. He knew the sage's wrath could be upon him. And he tried to appease her by speaking pleasing words and massaging her feet. Oh, sweet. I'm sure he never did that before. But he could not satisfy her by any means. When they got to the house of her father, Shukracharya was very angry and sad. And he said to the king, "You untruthful fool, lusting after women. You have done a great wrong. I curse you to be disfigured by old age and invalidity." When the king appealed to him, the sage relented. "You may exchange your old age with someone who will agree to transfer his youth to you." All right. Now, do you think if you were approached by this king, you would transfer your youth to the king? And take his old age and infirmity? Infirmity means disease or whatever else he might have. I don't think most people would. So he was placed in an impossible situation. The king tried asking his eldest son, "Please give me your youth in exchange for my old age and invalidity. My dear son, I am not yet satisfied in my sexual desires. If I receive your youth, I may enjoy life for a few more years." The oldest son refused. Then he went to his other sons, and they all refused too, except for the youngest, Puru. Puru was very pleased to accept the old age of his father. Before we go further, let me just show you a couple of pictures here. There's Shukracharya cursing the king turning into an old man right there and then. See, these sages had immense powers. And here is Yayati, the king, along with his youngest son, Puru. So Puru, the youngest son, says, "Oh, your majesty, who in this world can repay his debt to his father?" See, we don't think like that these days, do we? We don't think that our parents have a debt. We have a debt to our parents. We think, that was there. They had a good time. They had sex. They had me. Big deal, right? I don't owe them anything. We don't think those very parents not only gave birth to us, went through a tremendous ordeal at the time of birth, but also raised us for not just a few weeks, not just a few months like in the animal kingdom, but often for 20, 25 years we lived with our parents. And we owe them a tremendous debt. These days, we easily place them in old age homes, don't care what happens. It's their life after all. But Puru says, who in this world can repay his debt to his father? By the mercy of one's father, one gets the human form of life. And then he talks about why this human form of life is important. He says, because in this human form of life, one can become an associate of the Supreme Lord. In other words, one can elevate oneself to be enlightened, to be liberated, and to ultimately be with God, to be an associate of the divine. King Yayati became the ruler of the entire world, consisting of 7 islands, and ruled the citizens exactly like a father. Because he had taken the youth of his son, his senses were unimpaired, and he enjoyed as much material happiness as he desired. Meanwhile, his wife kind of came around. She saw that he had his punishment, and after all, he was a king, and she kind of came back around. So Devyani, the dear wife of King Yayati, engaged her mind, words, body, and various paraphernalia to bring her husband the greatest possible bliss. You can imagine, they really traveled everywhere, did everything, enjoyed in every possible way. King Yayati was also a good man. He was also very pious and saintly in many ways. He performed many sacrifices to satisfy the Supreme Godhead, and although he was the king of the entire world and enjoyed his mind and senses with material possessions for 1,000 years, he was unable to be satisfied. Now, you might say 1,000 years? That's crazy. But yes, people had longer lifetimes in previous times. It is said in even the Bible and various other places that people had much longer lives than they do today. The quality of life, we think, has gotten better. But according to our study of the Vedas, the ancient texts that were written thousands of years ago, that is not true. Where they used to live for thousands of years, we now live for maybe 100 at best, possibly much less than that. So this man enjoyed everything possible, right? And although he was very attached to women, in due course of time, he renounced this way of life. He said to his wife one day, "My dear wife, with beautiful eyebrows, I am so poor in intelligence that I am captivated by your beauty and have forgotten the real task of self-realization." You see, he's pointing out something very important, and this is true for all of us. We're all poor in intelligence. We think we are very smart. We think we've achieved a lot. But we're missing what's right in front of us, right in front of our eyes. Every single day, our bodies are withering. Our abilities are becoming weaker. Every single day, we find ourselves losing ground. And we don't realize it because it happens slowly, because it creeps up on us. Just like that frog that's being boiled in hot water. Just like that. We're like that frog. And we don't realize it. We don't realize how unintelligent we are because we live in the delusion of our intelligence. We think we're so smart, we can understand the stock market, we can understand electronics, we can understand technology, we can understand all these things. But we can't understand the very basic thing, that life is not about material enjoyment, not about sensory enjoyment. Those things are temporary. What matters is self-realization, because self-realization is the one thing that cannot be lost. Your spiritual progress can never be lost. It is eternal. Why? Because you are eternal. The body is not. So all the focus you've put onto the body and to the possessions and all external things, those things are lost at the time of death. They're lost even in the course of this life. There's only a limit to what you can enjoy and how long you can enjoy. But what is never lost is your connection with your soul. That part of you, once you have learned how to connect with it through meditation, through various practices, that part is never lost. And having attained this inner self-realization, and realization is not knowledge. Knowledge is, yeah, you can hear these talks and you can somehow go back and think, oh, I know a lot. But no, it's not about knowledge. It's about realization. It's about acting upon what you know. And once you act upon what you know, then there is realization, then you get it. Then it's not just an aha moment, but it's a lived moment. Then it's a moment of, now it has become internalized. It has become part of who you are. You can access that at any given time. Once you have learned to quiet your mind and access your soul, that access can never be lost. Just like how when you learn to ride a bicycle, right? You never forgot. Or roller skates, or driving a car. Right? Those were skills, you learned them. Similarly, when you learn to connect with your soul, you experience that deep inner peace, that sense of expansiveness, that sense of inner quiet where the chattering mind stops. Once you've learned it, you never forget it. It never goes away. It will never be lost. Even when you are 60, 70, 80, 90, it will always be there, and you'll always be able to turn within and access that divine space within you. So he says to his wife, a person who is lusty cannot satisfy his mind, even if he has enough of everything in this world. Now here, lust is not just about sexual lust, it's also about desire. So when the desires we have cannot satisfy our mind. How do I say that? Why does he say that? Because you're always wanting more. There's always the next thing, and always the next thing again, and beyond that, and beyond that. And even sometimes you'll see a 70, 80, 90-year-old person who can't even have sex is lusting over some women on the TV or wherever else he sees them. It never stops, right? And same with material desire. People have billions of dollars and still they're never satisfied. So no matter how much we go to satisfy our desire, the mind is never satisfied, and it never has enough of everything in this world. Nothing can satisfy us. Nothing of this world can satisfy us any more than taking a fish out of the water and giving it a TV, a house, a car. It doesn't care. It needs to be in the water. It belongs there, and there it is happy. Similarly, we are happiest when we connect with our true self. He continues explaining to his wife, as supplying butter to fire does not diminish the fire, butter or ghee to the fire does not diminish the fire, but instead increases it more and more, the endeavor to stop desire by continual enjoyment can never be successful. I really want you to contemplate this. Have you been able to quench your desires? You've spent your whole life trying to satisfy them. Every time your mind wants something, you go after it. You chase after the next toy, the next technology, the next thing, and I'm guilty of the same. I've been there, done that, and I've seen the same thing he's talking about, which is that my desires were never satisfied. That no matter how much I sought enjoyment, I was never successful. And when you begin to realize that, And sometimes it takes some time. If you're just beginning your life, you're 20 years old, you might not want to recognize that. You might think, no, there's hope. I can do this. Where everybody else failed, I can, I will. I'll show you. I've been that foolish person, so I know. But I can tell you this, that as time goes by, it becomes more and more clear. Nothing is able to satisfy me, or you, or any of us. We cannot be successful on this path, the path that this world is promoting, the path that this world has got us into, the treadmill that our television, our media, all of them are trying to suck us into, the stores, the malls, all of that. Then he goes on to say to his wife, when a person is non-envious and does not desire ill fortune for anyone, he will be equipoised. For such a person, all directions appear happy. Oh, he's talking about the key word here, happy. We all want that, don't we? Happiness. Why aren't we happy? Because we're envious. What are we envious of? Oh, I want the thing that that person has. I want what you have. I want what she has. I want what he has. And that's how we get sucked in, envy. And because we're envious, and sometimes we don't get what we want, well then we think ill of others. Sometimes, maybe not always. But when you let go of this enviousness, when you stop comparing yourself to others, when you stop comparing what I have, what you have, how I look, how you look, or how intelligent I am, how intelligent you are, how stupid I am, how stupid you are, whatever. You stop comparing. At that time, you become equipoised. Right? And then when you're equipoised means either way, it doesn't matter. Whether good happens or bad happens, it doesn't matter. Whether you get what you want or you don't get what you want, whether you have or you don't have, doesn't matter. Whatever you got, you're satisfied with that. Whatever comes easily and effortlessly, you're satisfied with that. For such a person, everything is good. Everything appears happy. On the other hand, he says now, for those who are too attached to material enjoyment, to sense gratification, it's very difficult to give up. So what is difficult to give up? The attachment. Even a simple thing like sugar can hook you in. What to say of alcohol, or coffee, or tea. And what to say of all the things we desire, from sex to material wealth and power and fame. You get that, yummy. And it's so difficult to give up. Ask someone who has that to give it up. Good luck. Even when one is an invalid because of old age, one cannot give up such desires. Therefore, one who actually desires happiness must give up such material desires which are the cause of all tribulations. He says, I have spent full 1,000 years enjoying sense gratification, yet my desire to enjoy such pleasure increases daily. So he gave the earlier example, right, of putting oil or butter or ghee into the fire. It only makes it more intense. I shall now give up all these desires and meditate upon the Supreme Person. Free from the dualities of this world and from false prestige, I shall wander in the forest with the animals. One should know that material happiness, whether good or bad, in this life or in the next, on this planet or on the heavenly planets, is temporary and useless. An intelligent person who understands this is the knower of the self. Now you know the truth. That's the truth. Such a self-realized person knows that material happiness is the very cause of continued material existence and forgetfulness of one's spiritual position. It's powerful, this message. See, we are all living in forgetfulness of our spiritual position. We do not remember in the course of the day that I'm a soul and that my happiness lies within me, that everything I'm seeking, the knowledge, the wisdom, the joy, the peace, the love, everything I'm seeking is right here inside me. We're like a person who's forgotten their keys and is looking all over the house for them. But it's inside your pocket. It was always with you. The thing you were looking for was right here. Now what's important is to learn how to access it. and how to make those pathways very easy to get to on a daily basis. That takes practice, sadhana. So such a self-realized person knows that material happiness is the cause of continued. So he's saying material happiness is the very cause of continued material existence. The more you get happiness in the world, the more attached you become. The more attached you become, the more you linger on, thinking, I'll get more and more and more and more. And it makes you forget your spiritual identity. The king then called his youngest son Puru and returned. Now, remember, the king had come to this point where he was going to leave his kingdom and everything else. And so he called his son. He returned his youth in exchange for his own old age. So they now traded places again. He then enthroned Puru as the emperor of the entire world and the proprietor of all its riches. And he placed all the other sons who were older than Puru under Puru's control. For those of you who know the Mahabharata, Puru is called the Puru dynasty. The Pandavas come under the Puru dynasty. And so this is that Puru. He is the ancestor of all the Pandavas and the Kauravas, actually. And he had a son, which we're going to be talking about very soon, whose name was Bharat. All right. Now, as for the queen, having enjoyed many sense gratification for many, many years, as far as the king, Yayati was accustomed to it, but he gave it all up in a moment, just as a bird flies away from the nest as soon as its wings have grown. He then completely surrendered unto the Supreme Godhead, Vasudeva, Krishna, became free from the contamination of the material modes of nature, and ultimately achieved the position of an associate of the Lord. Devyani, his wife, understood that the materialistic association of husband, friends, and relatives is like the association in a hotel full of tourists. Right? We meet tourists. We go to a hotel. We meet a lot of nice people, wonderful chit-chat, and, how's it going, and where are you from, and da-da-da. But our whole life, all the people we meet, including our closest family, are like people we meet in a hotel. We know them for a short while, and then we all go our own way. Even your children go their own way. Eventually they might come back and visit you, but there'll come a point at which we die, and then we go our own way, and who knows, maybe we meet, maybe we don't meet. So that's why the comparison is there to a hotel full of tourists. The relationships of society, friendship, and love are created by the illusion of the Supreme Being. So this is an illusory world we live in. Not only are the things illusory, see, the things we have, matter that appears so solid, appears so rock solid like that, is actually just made of energy, and therefore is nothing. And the same applies with everything else in the world. It's exactly as a dream. By the grace of the divine, Devyani gave up her imaginary position as queen and achieved liberation from the material world. All right, now we're coming to a really interesting story, and this is the story of Shakuntala and Dushmanta. Some of you have heard of Shakuntala and Dushyant. The spelling in Bhagavatam is different. It is pretty much the same story, but it is differently positioned. The story of King Dushyant and Shakuntala was made famous by Kalidas, who has been called the Shakespeare of India. Once upon a time, the sage Vishwamitra, very powerful sage, was doing great penance to Lord Shiva. Indra, who is the king of the Devas, was worried about the intensity of the sage's ascetic practice, as it would give Vishwamitra enormous powers. See, these sages would become extremely powerful with their... You saw how they could curse somebody and that curse would become real. So they could gain enormous powers. There were all kinds of siddhis, powers that they would get. They could get anything from anywhere, go anywhere, become smaller, bigger, whatever it is they wanted to do. They literally had a control over the world that you could not get by any amount of machines. So Indra, the king of the Devas, of the demigods, seeing how powerful Vishwamitra was becoming, decided to disturb the penance that he was doing. So Indra sent a seductress, an apsara, Menaka, to seduce the sage and nullify his penance. And it worked. Menaka visited the forest where Vishwamitra was doing great penance and changed the entire forest into a beautiful garden with her powers. Later, Menka succeeded in her attempt of disturbing the sage's penance, and both Vishwamitra and Menka had a beautiful daughter, but neither of them was able to care for her, so they abandoned her. The little girl was taken care of by sage Kanva, and the baby girl was called Shakuntala. Okay. So this Shakuntala, I'm going to show you a little image, as some people have tried to imagine what she might have looked like, was gorgeous. She was beautiful. She lived in the forest along with the sage who raised her. In the dynasty of Purus, remember we talked about Puru now? In his dynasty came Dushmanta. So in the Bhagavatam he's called Dushmanta. Once when King Dushmanta went to the forest to hunt and was very much fatigued, he approached the residence of Kanva Muni. Remember the great sage Kanva who had brought up the young girl Shakuntala. When the king saw this beautiful woman who sat there illuminating the entire ashram by her effulgence, the king was naturally attracted with lusty desires by her beauty. He felt very enlivened, and the fatigue of his hunting excursion was relieved. He inquired from her in joking mood. He said, "Oh, beautiful lotus-eyed woman, who are you? Whose daughter are you? What purpose do you have in this solitary forest? Why are you staying here?" Shakuntala said, "O king with eyes like the petals of a lotus, I am the daughter of Vishwamitra, the sage. My mother Menka left me in the forest, and the most powerful saint Kanva raised me. How may I serve you? Kindly sit down and accept whatever reception we can offer. We have some rice that you may kindly take." So all they had was some rice to offer him. That's it. They lived, after all, they lived out in the forest in an ashram. "And if you so desire, you may stay here without hesitation." The king Dushmanta was besotted. He was like, "Oh my God, I've got to have this woman." He said, "O Shakuntala with beautiful eyebrows, you have taken your birth in the family of the great saint Vishwamitra, and your reception is quite worthy of your family. Aside from this, the daughters of a king generally select their own husbands." So when Shakuntala responded to Maharaj Dushmanta's proposal with silence, the agreement was complete. Then the king immediately married her by chanting Om. This was called the Gandharva marriage. So this is a kind of marriage. Some people in the Vedic time would exchange garlands, and that was a marriage. Here it is by chanting Om that the marriage took place. So that night they had sex, and in the morning the king returned to his palace, and he told her to join him in a little while. He had to go and do some stuff, and then he'd be back, and then for her to join him later on. So here are some pictures for you. Dushmanta seeing Shakuntala at a distance, and later on he's with her. This is an extremely popular play, an extremely popular story. And it's based upon the Bhagavatam, and therefore is based upon itihas, which means factual histories. So different renditions of their time together. You'll see different kinds of artwork, different kinds of ways of depicting their story. So while leaving, Dushmanta had gave his ring to Shakuntala. So he left in the morning, right? So he gave his ring to Shakuntala to be presented to him when she appears in his court to claim her place as queen. After a few days, while Shakuntala was lost in her thoughts, so now here she was like, "Oh my God, this incredible thing has happened." She didn't tell anyone except her few girlfriends. They knew about it. But during the next few days, she was just lost in her thoughts. And the great sage Durvasa happened to come by the ashram. Now, Durvasa is very famous for being angry. He's a sage, but he's got a lot of anger still. Shakuntala failed to attend to the sage. And so Durvasa, being upset and angry with her that she didn't even attend to him, didn't even notice that he was there, he cursed her, saying that the one she was thinking about would forget her existence. Oh my God. This set up the stage for complete tragedy. Worried, Shakuntala became sad and told the sage Kanva, who had raised her, told her the entire story of what had happened, the love story between her and the king Dushyanta, her pregnancy, she was pregnant now, and Durvasa's curse. After hearing the entire story, the sage said, no worries, no worries. He's given you his ring, hasn't he? That's the solution. He'll see that and he'll remember everything. Don't worry. So she was relieved. And she began, so in course of time, she had her son. And in the forest, Kanva Muni, the sage, performed all the ritualistic ceremonies concerning the newborn child. And later, the boy became so powerful that it is said he could capture a lion and play with it. Shakuntala soon traveled to the capital of the king, Hastinapur, which is now New Delhi. And she went to meet with him. During her journey, she had to cross a river. And while crossing the river, the ring got lost when she playfully dipped her hand in the water. With that distress, she visited the capital, hoping the king Dushyant would recognize her. But because of the curse, Dushyant didn't recognize Shakuntala and therefore refused to acknowledge her. He sent her back. He says, go back to where you've come from. He thought of her like someone, who's trying to con him or something, trying to cheat him, trying to pretend she's something she's not. Well, the ring that was lost by Shakuntala was incidentally swallowed by a fish as it fell. A fisherman found the fish and the ring in its belly, and seeing the ring, the fisherman presented it to the king's court. He says, this belongs to the king, this ring. On seeing the ring, Dushyanta realized the mistake he had made, and he immediately, all his memory came back. And he immediately went to Kanva's ashram to meet Shakuntala. But before he could get there, he had to fight an entire battle and an army of asuras who he finally defeated and then made it to her. So now there's a lot of this that is not in the Bhagavatam, but then it continues in the Bhagavatam here. Shakuntala, the best of beautiful women, along with her son, whose strength was insurmountable, was back at the ashram now. When the king refused to accept her, and the Bhagavatam puts the story differently. That whole thing about the fish was something that is coming from the play by Kalidas. However, the Bhagavatam presents it like this. It says that when the king refused to accept his wife and son, that a unembodied voice spoke from the sky as an omen and was heard by everyone present. And it said, according to Vedic injunctions, the father is born as the son. Therefore maintain your son and do not insult Shakuntala. You are the actual procreator of this child. Indeed, Shakuntala is speaking the truth. So, the Bhagavatam says it differently than the story by Kalidas, which was all about that fish and the ring and everything else. When King Dushmanta passed away from this earth, so finally they got back together and, had a good life thereafter. All things were resolved. Now when this king passed away from this earth, his son from Shakuntala was named Bharat, and he became the emperor of the world. King Bharat, the son of Dushmanta, had the mark of Krishna's disc on the palm of his right hand, and he had the mark of a lotus whorl on the soles of his feet. So he was a very blessed being. Some say that the land of India was called Bharat after him. Others say it is because of another Bharat. And some say it is because, we don't know which of these kings it's named after, but this was perhaps the more recent one. As the emperor and master of the entire world, Bharat performed many sacrifices and distributed great wealth, cows and elephants to the Brahmins. No one could perform such activities in the past, nor will anyone be able to do so in the future. Meaning he was so generous, so giving, that he gave his wealth to all those who were dedicated to the path of bringing spirituality to the world. This is how it must be. That those who are engaged in bringing spirituality to the world need to be supported, just as in the past, you'll see in recent past, artists were supported. But more important than artists are the people who teach spirituality. They need to be supported. So that's what he was doing. He was distributing his wealth to the Brahmins, because that was their job. He defeated or killed all the kings that were opposed to the Vedic principles, the Asuras, the demonic people had captured all the wives and daughters of the devas, the demigods. So King Bharat rescued all of them and returned them to their homes. King Bharat provided all necessities for his subjects, both on this earth and in the heavenly planets, for 27,000 years. This idea of providing all the necessities for his subjects is a big one for us to learn from. Our kings, our rulers of today's time don't seem to care about these things. They do not care. They'll talk the talk, all kinds of fancy talk when it comes to election time. All of them. I'm not on the side of one party or the other. They're all in the game playing the same racket. They'll tell you everything. They'll promise you the earth. And what they deliver is often falls short of those things. And so people are disappointed again and again and again. And again somebody will come up and he will promise the moon and then disappoint them. And then the next person will come on and promise them a whole lot more. And again they'll be disappointed. And this goes on and on and on and on. But the kings of the Vedic time, this is what they specialized in, is providing all the necessities for their subjects. As a ruler of the entire universe, Emperor Bharat had the opulences of a great kingdom and unconquerable soldiers. His sons and family had seemed to him to be his entire life. But finally, as he got older, he thought about all of this as an impediment to spiritual advancement, and therefore he ceased from enjoying it. So again, we see the case of a king who comes to the point at the end of his life where he realizes, not even the end, but maybe, as he gets older, maybe 60, somewhere there, he decides, enough. Okay, I've enjoyed it all. I've seen it all. Time to move on. And then they'll go for renunciation and focus on their spiritual path. This king has an interesting little backstory here. He had 3 wives who were daughters of the king of Vidarbha. That means they were all sisters. With all 3 of them, he bore children. But these children did not resemble the king. And so the wives thought that he would consider them unfaithful and reject them. And therefore they killed their own sons. It's ridiculous. The king, his attempt for progeny frustrated in this way, performed a sacrifice, and the demigods known as the Maruts presented him a son named Bharadwaj. Oh, and there's a backstory to Bharadwaj as well. Bharadwaj was there was a demigod called Brihaspati who was attracted by his brother's wife, Mamta, and forcibly had sex with her. Mamta was very much feared being forsaken by her husband for giving birth to an illegitimate son, and therefore she considered giving up the child. The man who had sex with her, Brihaspati, he wouldn't take the son either, and so the Maruta demigods gave that son to King Bharat, who'd wanted a son. So somehow this recycling process took place. And then we come to the final story for this evening, and that is the story of Rantideva. It's a short one, but it's very inspiring. It's about a person with immense generosity, immense ability to see the divine in everyone. See, Rantideva was a descendant of King Bharat. So this is how you say Rantideva. I might as well just show you the spelling so you get an idea of what that is. He's an inspiration in many ways. He was the descendant of King Bharat. We talked about King Bharat a moment back. He's glorified in human society and amongst all the demigods, the devas. Rantideva never endeavored to earn anything. He would enjoy whatever he got by the arrangement of providence. And when guests came, he would give them everything. Thus he underwent considerable suffering, along with his members of his family. Indeed, he and his family members shivered for want of food and water. Yet Rantideva always remained sober. Once, after fasting for 48 days, in the morning, Rantideva received some water and some foodstuffs made with milk and ghee. And when he and his family were about to eat, a guest arrived. This person was a Brahmin, a priest. The guest arrived. Rantideva perceived the presence of the Supreme everywhere. So he was a person who actually felt the presence of the divine everywhere and in everyone. So here is this guest arriving. To him, it's the divine has arrived into my house. God has arrived to my house. I must receive this person as I would receive God. So he offers this guest with faith and respect. He gives him his share of his own food. The Brahmin ate his share and then went away. Then, having divided the remaining food with his relatives, Ranti was about to eat his own share when another guest arrived. This person was not a Brahmin, he was a Shudra, like a worker. And seeing the Shudra in relation, again seeing the divine within him, Rantideva gave him also a share of the food. When this person went away, another guest arrived. This person arrived with dogs. And he says, "O king, I and my company of dogs are hungry. Please give us something to eat." With great respect, Rantideva offered the balance of the food to the dogs and the master of the dogs who had come as guests. The king offered them all respects. And then only the drinking water remained. There was only enough to satisfy one person. And when the king was just about to drink it, a very dirty, filthy, lowly, like a homeless person, appeared. And he said, "O king, although I am lowborn, kindly give me some drinking water." Aggrieved at hearing the pitiable words of the poor, fatigued man, King Rantideva spoke the following nectarian words. Here's a picture just to show you. I do not pray to God for the 8 perfections of mystic yoga. So I told you there are many mystic perfections in yoga. Nor for salvation, nor from the repeated birth and death. I want only to stay among all the living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so that they may be freed from suffering. So here's another person willing to take on the sins of the world. Thousands of years before Christ came, there was another. I want to only stay among all the living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so that they may be freed from suffering. This is the nature of a compassionate person. This is the nature of a highly evolved being. They do not care about their own happiness, but only care about the happiness of others. By offering my water to maintain the life of this poor man who is struggling to live, I have been freed from all hunger, thirst, fatigue, trembling of the body, moroseness, distress, lamentation, and illusion. King Rantideva, although on the verge of death because of thirst, gave his own portion of water to the man without hesitation, for the king was naturally very kind and sober. At this point, Brahma and Shiva, who can actually satisfy all materially ambitious men by giving them the rewards they desire, right? They're known for that. Brahma and Shiva have been known to people pray to them so that they can get their desires met. This man wasn't asking for nothing. They showed up. They manifested their true identities before the king, for it was they who had presented themselves as these different guests that had arrived at the king's house. They had personally come to test him and to see what he would do. The king had no ambition to enjoy material benefits from the demigods. They offered him anything that he wanted. He says, no, I don't want anything. My devotion is to the divine. My devotion is to Vishnu, to God, to the Supreme Being. King Rantideva was a pure devotee and free from all material desires. Therefore, the illusions of Maya, the illusions of this world, could not affect him. On the contrary, for him, the illusions entirely vanished, exactly like a dream. All of those who follow the principles of King Rantideva are totally favored by his mercy and become pure devotees attached to the Supreme Godhead. Thus they become the best of yogis. All right, today has been long. With this, we end the 9th canto, and from next time, we're going to begin the 10th canto, which is the stories of Krishna. Those are the most fascinating and beautiful. And if you haven't heard them, you're going to love it. They're not about detachment or about all this stuff about getting past the illusion. They're about getting to know the divine in a way you've never known before. Getting to know the Supreme Being, not only as a child, but as an adult, and the different ways of love, the ways of having a romantic relationship with the divine, the ways of having a parental relationship with the divine, or as a friendship. You'll get to see it all. It's going to be a fascinating journey, the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We've been doing this now for, I think, almost 80 episodes. I'm just guessing right now. And that means 80 weeks or so, roughly. And we've got a long way to go anyway from here. So I'm going to take a look at the questions we have here. Those of you who are here have any questions, please write them down. I am looking forward to hearing from you. There's a lot of you here on Instagram, many more on Zoom as well as on YouTube. So let's see what you got. Any questions at all? All right, Cindy's got a question here about multiple personality disorders. Let's take a look at this question. All right, I seem to be having some trouble with the text here, but I'll try to get this in place. All right, I want to make it sure that everyone can see, including those on Instagram. Okay. Oops. All right, I'm just going to bring it up here. What about multiple personality disorders? Is this perception of self or an error? See, the idea of multiple personalities is something that is a very deep topic. There are many reasons why one could have that. Yes, there is the traditional idea that there's a fragmentation of a person's personality. Yes, there is that idea presented by psychology. But there are also other possibilities, though that of being possessed by different entities, that of having various energies acting upon a person. We have to be very aware. Multiple personalities don't occur unless there is a loss of self. It cannot occur to a person who is fully in charge of themselves. To me, it is extremely important that you know what is you and what is not you. If you know what is you, then you will not be caught up with depression or negative thinking or multiple personalities. Multiple personalities is an extreme case where now your mind is totally taken over. And when it is taken over to that degree, you become something else. That something else, as I said, the psychologists might call it different words in terms of the fragmenting of your own personality, but it could also be entities, dead people who have entered into you and are now working through you. It could be various spirits. I don't know. There's a whole other realm of possibility that needs to be considered. As for the many aspects of self, yes, that is the normal psychological way of looking at it. However, you'll find out in the case of multiple personalities that they tend to be so diverse, so different, so unique, that it's very difficult to think of someone making that up. Now, in some cases where you have one part that's trying to help the other, there could be the case of fragmented personalities. But in some cases, the personalities are so diverse, they don't even seem related to each other. They don't seem to know about each other even. So it all depends. It's a case-by-case thing, and you need to be able to look at it from there. And it's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing out here. You're welcome, Cindy. Any other questions? Hey, Sid. How does one purify themselves of fear, particularly of the future? What a great question. Thank you. Thank you, Sid, for that question. How do you purify yourself from fear of the future? Okay, let's take a look at that. Fear of the future is your mind trying to go to a place that it knows nothing about. So it's like me trying to worry about how would it feel to be on the moon. I don't know, I've never been there. So it's trying to predict something which it cannot predict. Your mind is not capable of predicting the future. And yet it's afraid of it, yet it's trying to go there. The only thing you've got that's real is here and now. And as long as you can stick to that, you're not going to have anxiety about the future. On the other hand, having said that, sometimes you do have to plan. And sometimes you do have to take action. So then in that case, if it's a practical matter, sit down and work out a plan. Be real about it. But if it's something your mind is just going on and on and on, dragging you into the future or the past, then you've got to be able to put a leash on that mind. You've got to be able to say, hey, we don't go there. Thank you so much. Now, as for worry, one of the best tools I've found is this. If your mind is truly anxious, then instead of trying to just take a deep breath, as most people say, or trying to just relax or chill or forget about it or avoid it in some way by trying to get busy, it is much better to magnify it. All right, let's go there. Come on, mind. Let's go. Let's go. Come on, bring it on. Bring it on. What have you got? What have you got? Show me what's going to happen then. And then what's going to happen. And then what's going to happen. And finally, you'll find it has nothing more to say. If you're willing to take it on instead of being afraid of it, you will find that your fears dissolve. This actually works. There's many psychologists who have been working on this principle. There are many of us who've tested this idea. I have as well. And I found the mind tends to make stuff up. And when you fall into that trap of, listening to it, sort of going into that trance that most people get into, where they're listening to the mind and it's telling them, yeah, this could happen and that could happen, and what about this and what about that, then we tend to get sucked in. And when we get sucked in like that, we lose our power, we become helpless, and we find ourselves caught up in worry and anxiety and fear. So if you really want to get out of fear, be willing to challenge your thoughts. Be willing to challenge your mind. Your mind is saying, oh, we're going to have an accident, or we're going to bang, or this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. All right, let's go there. Then what will happen? Okay, I'll die. Okay, then what? That's the worst you got? All right. Well, I know that I'm a soul, and I cannot be killed no matter what happens. So one way or the other, I'm going to make it out of this alive. Thank you so much, mind. Appreciate your inputs, but no thank you. Give a fish a TV. You like that one, huh? Okay. Love you, brother. All right. Thank you so much. All right, guys. It seems like let's see. There's some more questions here. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And please be here starting next week. We've got some really exciting stuff happening. I think it'll be a real eye-opener next week. I've been waiting for the time where we get here, and it's happening now. So please be here next week. Every Tuesday, we're here at 7 p.m. Pacific time and 10 p.m. Eastern time. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna.